For some time, I was very confused about why the church chose this particular gospel that you heard today, which seems to really focus on the Annunciation story, or the conception of Jesus in the womb of Mary. And I always thought it was confusing because so many times when I'd ask people, what is the Immaculate Conception about? They would refer to the birth of Jesus. And it's not about that. That's a totally wrong notion of the meaning of the Immaculate Conception. Because the conception we're talking about is the conception of Mary in the womb of her mother, Saint Anne. That's the conception we're talking about. Because in that conception, Mary received a singular privilege that you and I did not receive. When you and I were conceived in the wombs of our mothers, we were conceived with original sin. We were conceived with the sin of Adam and Eve, the destruction of the harmony of creation, which they created by their disobedience. And so, in this passage from the book of Genesis, we have God who questions Adam and Eve about their disobedience. We meet them after the fall. And God questions them, and Adam says, "The woman gave me the fruit, and I ate it." It's almost as if he's blaming it on her. But actually, he's not really blaming it on her, as much as focusing on the fact that he called her Eve, and she became the mother of the living. That from her maternity, all subsequent creation comes forth. From her womb, all subsequent humanity is brought forth into the world, and all that subsequent humanity is experiencing the fallen nature caused by original sin. You know, the classic question, why do bad things happen to good people? Because of original sin. So, Adam and Eve then represent the fall of humanity, and at that very time, God begins to plan redemption. Because God is love, and love cannot abide separation. God does not want to be separated from you and me. God mourns the fact that we can be disobedient, and that Adam and Eve were disobedient and caused all creation to follow, to be tainted by original sin. And so God plans creation, and I think it's beautifully expressed in this passage from the letter of St. Paul to the Ephesians, where Paul says, "In love, he destined us for adoption to himself through Jesus Christ." You and I, because of the redemptive act of Christ, are adopted by baptism. By baptism, we become the adopted sons and daughters of God. And so, this is how God brings us to participate in the redemptive act through baptism. That's why baptism is necessary. That's why we have to evangelize that God calls us to salvation, beginning with the sacrament of baptism, by which the power of original sin is negated in such a way that original sin will not totally destroy us for all eternity, but that we're given the grace to conquer that original sin and to gain eternal life. And in the Lucan gospel that we heard, the Annunciation story, we have the angel Gabriel who comes to Mary, and his greeting is very significant. He says to her, "Hail, full of grace." That is an indication that she is full of grace, that there is nothing about her that is participating in the original sin, because she is filled with God. And it just makes common sense that God would not be born of a woman who was sinful. God cannot come from sin. Therefore, God rewards Mary's faith with that singular privilege given to no one else but for the sake of his Son. It points to his Son always. Mary always points to Jesus. And for the sake of bearing God in the flesh, she does not participate in the effects of original sin. The angel Gabriel again says, "Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you," indicating that she is a God-bearer, the God-bearer, therefore without original sin, without the fallen nature of man and woman. And so that's the Immaculate Conception that we celebrate today, so that we might honor her for her place in the story of our salvation, that we might look to her as that model of faith which brings that ultimate reward of eternal redemption, that we might look at her and see what will be given to us because God desires to adopt us and to bring us back into that state, that original state before the fall, in which there was no death, there was no sickness, there was no deceit, there was no meanness of any sort, but rather the fullness of life and the hope of undistracted communion with the love of God. And so we see that in Mary, and we ask her today to help us and to help our country to be more godlike, to be more servant-like, to be more humbled as she was humbled as the Maiden of Nazareth.